I know it's 6:31, but let's give it a few more minutes, even though everyone is inside and the snow is outside. People might be a little bit late joining.
Okay.
So do you see Valerie?
I don't see Valerie, but I do see Natalie, who is going to be giving the presentation, but we're still waiting on one more person to join.
Right. So I know I saw Natalie as well. I also had down Meredith Almeida. I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know if Meredith will be coming.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I think I covered up your name. Okay. Hi, Natalie. Um, so I know you said you were inviting a couple of other people, but you'll be doing the presentation?
Yes, Francesca Bruce and Christopher Ferry are here
I
with
see.
us. They will, I would, if possible, I would like them to also, they'll have like a minute each in the
Okay.
presentation and then answer questions.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. Just crossing out Meredith. Okay, and we'll have our elected officials joining at 7 as we discussed, but I think if we give it a couple of minutes, you'll still have plenty of time.
Okay, and Valerie is here.
Okay. Okay, Valerie, let's give a nod when you want to start the meeting.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Go ahead. I didn't realize you were waiting for me. Sorry.
No, I wasn't. I just was giving people a chance to get in and drive from any snow journeys they might have taken. And also psychologically, if there's a storm, sometimes people are just late. Okay, so then why don't we get started? Hi, everyone. Welcome to the February meeting of CB8 Small Business Committee. We're very happy to have tonight some special guests. We have Natalie Mendel from the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce to talk about the New York City Small Business Resource Network. And then beginning at 7 o'clock roughly, we'll have Borough President Gail Brewer and our City Council members, Ben Kalos and Keith Powers, to join us and talk about small business in New York City government. So why don't we begin with Natalie and the Small Business Resource Network. And I know she has a couple of colleagues here who will address us as well. Thank you. Natalie?
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Natalie Mendel. I am the Director of Business Recovery for the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. I have two of my team members here. They are business support specialists, Christopher and Francesca. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a moment when I'm going to first share the PowerPoint, but I did want to thank you for having us tonight. Am I allowed to share my screen?
Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
And before you do that, I should have just introduced myself and Valerie. I'm so forgetful. I'm Alita Camp and my colleague Valerie Mason. We're co-chairs of the Small Business Committee. So thank you. Thank you, Saida.
Of course. And actually, before we start, let me just give my little spiel for anybody who may be joining for the first time. Okay, so I'm Saida Harrigan. I'm a community associate with CB8, and I'll be moderating the technical sides of the meeting tonight. So a few notes for you, particularly if this is your first time attending one of our meetings. You'll notice that you're muted and unable to mute yourself. After the presentation, the co-chairs will call on you, members of the public who wish to speak, and you can be asked to be recognized by raising your virtual hand. I say virtual hand because it's important not to raise your physical hands or wave around at the screen because we won't be able to see you that way. You can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. It's going to be in the reactions button. And if you're using an older version of Zoom, you can access that feature by clicking the participants button on the menu at the bottom of the screen and select raise hand. If you're on a phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 or *6 to unmute. I'm sorry, *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And once you're recognized by the co-chair, I'll unmute you and you may be prompted to confirm unmuting on your device. Another note is that the chat function is available for technical support only, not to ask any questions of the co-chairs. So if you're having any technical issues, you can feel free to send me a chat and I can help you troubleshoot any issues that you may be having. And with that, I'll pass the mic to the co-chairs, Aaliyah Camp and Valerie Mason.
Thank you very much, Saida. Great. And back to you, Natalie. So you're ready for Natalie to share her screen, Saida?
Oh, yes. Okay, I have access. Okay, is this working?
Yes.
It is.
Great. Okay, so I am here to present on the New York City Small Business Resource Network. So the New York City Small Business Resource Network is a citywide initiative that all 5 borough chambers of commerce are working on together to help small businesses survive the pandemic. The Small Business Resource Network, which we call the SBRN for short, is a unique private-public partnership that provides local businesses with free, personalized guidance to access a variety of resources. Resources include, we have relationships with corporate, financial, and professional service sectors with unique support from universities, philanthropies, and expert volunteers. I'll go more into the types of resources we provide for businesses in the next few slides. This public-private partnership is funded by a $2.8 million grant from the New York City-based Peterson Foundation and supported by in-kind contributions from other partners. So we have a lot of groups and stakeholders working on the Small Business Resource Network, the Partnership Fund for New York City, EDC, and the Peterson Foundation, and all 5 borough chambers of commerce. And then we also do have some assistance from New York City's Department of Small Business Services. So the types of resources that we provide are financial guidance. If you need help getting connected to a PPP lender, or you need help getting a loan or connected to a grant, we have a ton of different financial resources in our network that we can connect businesses to. We also help with resources in marketing expertise, tech support. So a lot of businesses aren't online yet, and if you need help, if you want free advice on where to start, if you don't have a website, we can help you with website assistance, social media, or if you do have a website, we can help and you're looking to improve it, we can help provide you with tech resources to improve your online presence. We have pro bono lawyers as well that we can connect you to. There's a lot of businesses that have questions right now about their lease or other legal issues, and we can connect you to a free lawyer. And we also have resources for business coaching. So expert volunteer groups who can help you with your business strategy. Oops. So we also have special offerings for Small Business Resource Network members. For example, we had a free website grant recently. Applications are closed, but we did give away $500 grants to get you a website to small businesses. Even though the applications are currently closed, please stay tuned for future opportunities. So you might be asking yourself, what qualifies you to be a small business resource network member? And it's only 2 requirements. You just have to be a small business, which means you have 100 employees or less, and you need to be located in New York City. That's it. You do not need to be a chamber member. There's no other requirements. It's completely free, and you can sign up at smallbiz.nyc. There's 4 easy steps to get your free support. You would first go to one way is first by going to our website, smallbiz.nyc is the short link. The long link is nycsmallbusinessresourcenetwork.org. You sign up by submitting a short intake form on the website. After the form is completed, you will be assigned a small business support specialist through your local Chamber of Commerce. And then you will work with that specialist to assess your business needs. And after the specialist understands your needs, you will get personalized guidance and access to resources for your business. So this is what our website looks like. The website is available in these different languages. And we cover Manhattan. I have a team of 6 business specialists, 5 business support specialists, and 1 tech support specialist. So as you can see, everyone has their own territory. Francesca and Christopher cover your community board district. So I have them here with me tonight. They will introduce themselves, their territory, and a little bit about their work. And then I can explain our technical specialist, Star, when I get to his slide. But Star is a technical specialist who covers Manhattan, Bronx, and Staten Island. So I will now let Francesca speak if she is unmuted.
Happy to do that. Hi. Oh, pardon.
No, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Francesca. I am the Small Business Support Specialist for Inwood, the Heights, East Harlem, and a little bit of West Harlem. And I am working with a lot of businesses of every different size and type, some brand new businesses, which is wonderful and reassuring. We work with restaurants as well, which, is a real challenge at the moment. But as Natalie described, we have a ton of resources rotating through the network that I encourage you to ask me about. Thanks so much.
And I'll let Chris, there's Chris's slide.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm also a business support specialist. My district basically covers everything between 87th Street and 20th Street, east of 5th Avenue, as well as Roosevelt Island. I know a significant portion of CB8 is in that area, and this is an area that I'm very familiar with. I did my undergraduate and graduate degree at Hunter, right on 68th, so I know the neighborhood. I know a lot of the business here for many years, and I'm really excited to be working with all of you now and all the small businesses that call CB8 their home. So thanks for having us.
Thank you, Chris. And at the end, I'll also share our contact information, but please do not hesitate to reach out to Chris or Francesca. I'm gonna just go fast through these slides since there are other parts of Manhattan, but we do have a specialist named Alejandro who covers most of the Upper West Side and Morningside Heights. Sean covers Hell's Kitchen down to West Village and then the Lower East Side. And then Justin is a support specialist who covers most of Lower Manhattan. So we have a tech specialist named Starling Childs, and he can help businesses with websites, databases, user experience design, and more. The Chamber right now is currently having tech office hours, which is every Wednesday in February, and a business can sign up for a free one-on-one consultation with Star to discuss different tech resources for their business and any questions that they have tech related. You can scan this QR code or go to this website, tech-office-hours.card.co, and you could just book an appointment with Star. You also could sign up for the Small Business Resource Network and get connected to him that way as well. Okay, so how we connect businesses to resources, or how we can all help connect businesses to the resource network. We have flyers and palm cards available in 9 different languages. So if your community board district has a language preference, we'd be happy to drop off any flyers or palm cards if that interests you. We have seen other partner groups and we've seen other like bids and partners post to social media or newsletters. We're also out in the field on a weekly basis doing door-to-door outreach. There is the option of hosting a small business resource network info session catered to your business owner specifically. But also we are on the ground every single week. If there are businesses you know that are in need of help and they want free assistance, you can always shoot us an email or a call and we would be happy to make a visit in person. I also just wanted to mention that the Manhattan Chamber is giving out free face masks and hand sanitizer this week. Any small business located in Manhattan can take advantage, or honestly, any small business in the city can take advantage of this offering. You can schedule a pickup at the link provided here, or you can email the help desk at manhattancc.org and we'd be happy to get you free face masks. So we encourage you to stay in touch. This is everyone's contact information. I know it looks like a lot, but the top 2 emails are probably the most important for you to write down, Francesca and Chris. And then I'm at the bottom and here are our websites again. I'll leave this up for a second before I go to the next slide and open the floor to questions. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Let's go and ask if there are any questions from any members of the public. Please raise your virtual hand if you have any questions. I don't see any questions from the public or anyone from the board. I have a couple of questions. Valerie, do you have any questions?
Go ahead, you can go first, it's fine.
Okay, CB8 is really concerned about restaurants and outdoor space or enclosed indoor outdoor space. And we're not really convinced that a lot of the restaurant designs are compatible with health needs. So I'm wondering, when you work with restaurants, what kinds of accommodations, what you're doing, because the restaurants on the east side that we've seen are so bundled up for the cold weather that they're not really outdoors. How do you help restaurants design and comply with all of the various, and there are quite a lot of them, health directives regarding their space?
Yes, so we actually, the Small Business Resource Network has a restaurant dedicated specialist. She is housed at the Brooklyn Chamber, but she works with businesses across the 5 boroughs. So if there is a restaurant who has regulation questions about outdoor dining or indoor dining, and they're if their needs are very specific to restaurant only, we would hand them off to our restaurant expert. I don't know if Chris and Francesca want to add anything to that. But yes, I should have.
Has her hand up. Can we unmute her?
You can confirm unmuting, Lori?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Lori Kupfer, and I'm in the Sutton Place neighborhood. I'm an architect. I'm a sole practitioner. And so my question is, are you considering involving architects to help small businesses? Because a lot of people have an idea about what they might want to do as a small business, but they don't know how to find a space and how to design a space and who to talk to and how to deal with the Department of Buildings and code issues, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if you have a component of architectural expertise on your team to assist small businesses. And this also ties into the restaurant question. If somebody wanted to design their outdoor space, who would they go to help them do something that's aesthetic and interesting and would draw the public over, as well as code compliant?
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting question. We have a ton of different resources to help restaurants, but from the top of my head, I don't recall one that's design specific, but that doesn't mean we're opposed to it either. We're adding resources on a weekly basis. So if you have a good resource that you think would be valuable, I encourage you to email me and we can go from there.
Yep. I'm just thinking about all of the small architects who are looking for work in different ways and have a lot of talent and want to contribute. And, you know, I would like to contribute just to be doing something for New York City, and helping people who, listen, I'm a small business, I struggle myself, and I can certainly appreciate anybody else's struggles and desires to, you know, be a success. So
totally,
a lot of people like me out there who would want to help.
Absolutely. I encourage you to email me and the corresponding specialist, whether that's Chris or Francesca, and we can all touch base.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That sounds really useful. If you could maintain a list of potential resources for people like designers or architects, some kind of contractor list. I don't know about vetting and I don't know any of the legal issues, but just having resources is so useful. Valerie, do you want to ask your questions? I have a couple more, but I'll wait.
I just wanted to give Francesca an opportunity to answer because she had her hand up to answer when Natalie was saying something. So Francesca, do you want to say something?
Sure. I was just going to add that we do have, as Natalie said, a couple of additional resources. We have one design specific resource, but it's a modular sort of free plan design. I don't believe that we are currently working with any architects, but one thing that we also encourage, if you're interested, is to explore the chamber member directory if you're interested in working with any of our members who in some cases are potentially willing to work on a sliding scale or negotiate different rates for their services.
Great, thank you. I see Brian Correa and Kaz Spagnoletti from the board have their hands raised. So Saida, would you unmute first Brian and then Kaz, please?
Sure. Brian, confirm unmuting.
Hey, hey, good evening, everybody. It's Brian. So I mean, I think it's a great concept. And certainly while you were doing the presentation, I was perusing the website. I'm just, I'm curious, like, what are the top requested services that you guys have in the network? So I'm trying to like frame it for some business owners that I know that are in CB8 that probably, I'm not thinking of, some things that they might be looking for. And I want to be able to like frame it, for what kind of resources that people are going and searching in the network for.
Definitely. Financing is always our number one requested. It's our most popular resource requested, which I'm sure you guys are not surprised about.
So I'm sorry, it's a follow-up question to that, like bankers or, like revenue resources. I mean, I'm assuming bankers.
Yeah, no, they're access to capital. Yeah, like grants or loans.
Got it.
It's definitely number one. Chris, and Francesca, do you guys want to say what you've been seeing the most in your areas?
Yeah. So one of the big ones beyond financing, because everybody's always interested in grants, of course, is lease negotiation, legal support. That one has come up a lot with a lot of the people I've spoken to in this area, and we have a couple of legal resources now to refer them to. They usually have a very quick turnaround. So that's been a common problem. If it's something you're seeing, we could help with it.
Cool.
I would agree with that. And pardon.
Oh, Francesca, you can go, I think.
I would agree with that. And I would also say that we offer digital resources. A lot of people are trying to expand their digital footprint and could use some help with strategy on that count. So we often refer STAR in-house technology specialist and additional services, discounts, partnerships, that kind of thing. But so that is something that we see a lot of businesses, certainly in my territory, looking for.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Kaz, you can confirm unmuting.
Yeah, how much liaison do you have with city agencies and state agencies as far as DOT and DOB and SLA?
Well, depending on what your issue is, we have pretty strong relationships with definitely small business services. And I think we definitely can connect you. We have the Manhattan Chamber has relationships with state and city agencies, but the network definitely has local connections. And if we don't personally, I'm sure someone in our network will have a connection. So I encourage anyone, whatever their issue be, apply for the network and we'll do whatever we can to resolve your issue.
Well, I'm not thinking so much that I have an issue, but I'm walking around and the DOT came out with regulations as far as the size and what should be done for outside or street dining. If you walk around, you see some places they're fully enclosed, yet they have people inside. I'm walking around and I'm seeing it's supposed to be 8 feet from the curb. I'm looking around and I see some 10, 12 feet out. Half the sidewalk is taken up. So I'm just wondering if you have any pull with the DOT and the DOB as far as making sure that these places are legit rather than it's a free-for-all. And the few places that do play by the rules, they're the ones that are being hurt. You know, there's a few establishments that are not playing by the rules. They're gambling, admittedly, but then they're making it harder for all the legal small establishments that are playing by the rule. So
Right.
do you have any or should I ask this question at the elected officials when they come?
Both.
Sorry, what?
I was just saying you can ask that, but Kaz, you can ask your question again when we get to that portion of the evening. Go ahead, Natalie.
So we can answer questions about enforcement, but we don't do the enforcement, if that makes sense. We're here to help businesses. We're not going to report them. But if a business calls and asks us a question related to like DOT or DOB, we'll get the answer for you or do our best to get the answer for you.
Okay.
So Natalie, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You mentioned in the beginning these $500 grants for setting up a website, which is, I think, $25,000 in total. How many people applied for that, and how many people were sort of left out of the money, if you will? Was that oversubscribed in any substantial way?
We got a pretty good turnout. There was over 200 applications,
Okay.
but we're really hoping that we can get more funding so that we could do this program again or do a program like it again.
Okay. Was that just 50 in the entire city, or was that 50 in Manhattan?
It's 50 in the entire city, 10 per borough.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, $2.8 million sounds like a significant amount of money, and 25,000. I mean, how much do you have available for actual grants, and what's going to your operating expenses as an organization?
Right. Well, we have 22 business support specialists in total.
Okay.
So the funding supports them. It supports our admin and technical support, because we all have to like communicate with each other, and we have programs that we use to make the network, and then there's marketing. But I do not have an answer at the moment for like how much money is available for grants per se, but we're definitely working on getting more grant programs up and running.
So I appreciate that. So if we encourage these small businesses to sign up with your resource network, then if more money came through, would they just be notified as part of them being part of the group? I'm just trying to say, I don't think we had heard about, you know, even the 50 spots being available before this. So,
Yeah.
So that would be important, obviously. And then in terms of maybe we can put you together with other organizations that have come to our meetings, such as Shop UES, which is trying to promote small business on the Upper East Side. Maybe we can put you together with them so that you can take advantage of their small business list, and maybe encourage those small business owners to contact you. The other question I wanted to ask you was, Chris mentioned that a lot of the calls, besides looking for financing and grants, were related to getting some good legal advice regarding how to approach their retail spaces and negotiations with landlords. How does that work? I mean, if you send somebody to a lawyer, who's paying for the legal advice? I mean, is this a service that is this backed up by your group, or is this, can you just explain? I don't want to try to.
Yeah, no, of course. So we're basically connectors. There's like pro bono legal resources that already exist. So we just connect them. If Chris wants to speak more on this, like he can give an example without giving like the business information, but we connect to free legal resources, and then this like nonprofit would handle logistics.
Okay.
I'd like to, and I'm sorry, Natalie and Valerie, but Gail Brewer is here, our borough president, and she has a very limited amount of time. I believe that she has to leave by 7:30. So would it be okay to interrupt the presentation? And maybe if the folks from the Small Business Resource Network have time, you could stick around and see if there are additional questions. I know Marco had his hand up, but because the borough president is here for a limited amount of time, and I know how concerned she is about the health and welfare of small business, I'd like to turn to her. Borough President Brewer, I know I was very loose in communicating with your office in terms of what we were hoping you would be able to bring to the Small Business Committee this evening. But I think if you could address what you're hoping the city might be able to achieve, what you see the climate looking like for small businesses in the future coming out of the pandemic, what your office may be able to help them achieve as well. And Marco, we'll get to you in your question a bit later, if that's all right. Thank you. Borough President Brewer.
Thank you very much. I can listen also because I can learn a lot. But from my perspective, there are a couple of things, and it's rough. I think first of all, I hope that with SBS will help me and the community boards make sure that the Department of Finance comes up with the data, because there is a law, and the law states that by the end of this month, the Department of Finance is supposed to collect and post every developer, every owner of every building that has a storefront has to tell the public that there's a vacancy, what the previous rent was, if that's possible, and the square footage, and a few other details. That data is going to be extremely helpful, because right now that bill passed before the pandemic, and we all know even on Broadway it's a 78% increase. And that was a year ago as to the numbers of vacancies pre and during the pandemic, 78% increase during the pandemic. So I think what I'm trying to say is we've got to get this data. And I hope that SBS will help us. I know it's a sister agency. We'll be putting pressure on them. That's number one. The second thing is we got to be, I don't know how to be creative, but I know that's what we have to do. And that even in the empty storefronts, there was an article that a tiny place called Southampton, which is out on the island, and certainly the bid, the Columbus Avenue bid, really did a huge amount of effort with a grant to put art into the vacant storefronts. So that doesn't help with the rental. Where there's a bid though, or chamber or active residence, the way it was done at the bid on Columbus Avenue is absolutely gorgeous. First of all, the art is phenomenal. And what the woman who's in charge did was she actually has a theme, sort of like a yellow ribbon, except it's obviously on the window of the storefront. It looks gorgeous. It helps because when you have an empty storefront next to a business that's trying to survive, it kills that business because, dirt, garbage, the homeless. So figuring out how good artists can play a role and how it can be a theme that's part of that block. And believe it or not, that's a small issue, but helps. And then the third issue is working. I do love the Center for Urban Future and Jonathan Bowles and idea of entrepreneurship. I mean, you know, the worst scenario that Community Board 8 and I would have would be that the chain stores arrive and start, you know, buying up. We did stop it a little bit, and I don't know if Board 8 wants to do this, but obviously from 72nd to 110th Street, thanks to the work that I did in the council, there is a zoning, I don't know if you call this solution, because the brokers hate it. I'm going to be honest with you. And the developers and owners hate it. The bids don't love it, so I don't bring it up. And I think it's making a difference, but we haven't got an analysis from City Planning Commission. But basically what it states is on Amsterdam and Columbus, you cannot have a storefront unless it already exists. That's more than 40 feet in a usually 200-foot block. So that's a zoning response. And then on Broadway and everywhere else, you can't have a bank that's more than 25 feet in terms of the length of the store. Most blocks are around 200 feet. Now, is that a good idea around the city? I don't know around Manhattan, but it is the law. And let me tell you, I don't know how many times owners, oh, Gail, can you please make an exception for my building? I say no, because as soon as I make exception for your building, because believe it or not, City Planning Commission says call Gail. I'm not going to make a decision and not going to change the law. I can't do that by myself, and I shouldn't. So then we try to figure out, you know, can they do 2 entrances or do something, because it's all about the streetscape. If you've got a CVS and a Chase Bank in the entire block, it's just dead landscape, streetscape from my perspective. On the other hand, I know that working with SBS, we got to find solutions. We've got to get rid of the commercial rent tax. Specifically, they're all of your blocks are in commercial rent tax. And at least for the storefronts, I don't know why it's still there. It's terrible. Right now it's for 500,000 or more in terms of your income. And it's, you know, you need to get rid of it. So that's one place we can help. I think generally until I don't know when we get out of this pandemic, the fines and fees and the city, I still get complaints all day long, and I'm sure that we'll get some too. You know, you're getting a fee for this and a fine for that. You got to pay a fee for this and a fine for that, even though it's been relaxed somewhat for the outdoor furniture. I got it. But there's still a lot of coming around. I'm sure sanitation people will be around. I don't know enough to know except the complaints. I don't have a sense of the full picture. But SBS should be looking at this and saying, for God's sake, you know, these small businesses are just trying to survive. We cannot be finding them, nickel and diming them. But then of course, how do you work with them so they don't end up breaking the law in some way that is not appropriate for the community? Maybe we need some kind of mediation. That's the other issue. Oath has free mediation. I've been using it in some cases. And then, you know, the real issue is the commercial rents are pretty low now, but how do you fill up those storefronts? You know, I think we actually probably have to do some outreach for what I would consider some creative, edgy, interesting entrepreneurs. You know, what are we doing as a borough? And I should be asking this myself, but I am working on it, to invite entrepreneurials, even, you know, some people who maybe came from the street, meaning the vendor life, or the home kitchen, or the home bead shop, or the home hat shop, or some list that has been worked with the city to do entrepreneurial work that would make a go of it at some of these storefronts. I mean, I think we have to do some outreach. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some of the issues that we have to address. And I'm sure the SBS and you are already doing it, and I'd love to listen, but those are some of the issues that I would suggest. And thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the borough president?
Marco has his hand raised again.
Marco, if you could unmute him.
Confirm unmuting, Marco.
I do not have an answer for Gail, but I have a question for the presentation. That will be okay? Or somebody else have a question for her, I can wait.
Yeah, Marco, it's Valerie. Can you wait for the to
Can you
go
hear
back
me
to the
now?
presentation? I just wanted to ask the borough president a couple of questions if I could. Is that all right? Do you mind? I guess so.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for coming tonight, Borough President. In terms of the commercial rent tax, where should the effort be focused in getting that repealed? I mean, who should we be contacting to get that? I mean, we know that Dan Garodnick was very active in trying to get it removed for many years, and Keith Powers has been working on it as well as with Kalos. But who is really the person who's going to remove that tax?
Well, the city council can do it. So that's number one. They can do it. So it could be the speaker. It could be, I assume it's probably Danny Drum and the finance committee. So it's the city council. At the same time, I was a little confused also because the state, I think Brad Hoylman has a state bill. So I was confused as to how they could also do it. This is the issue of, New York City not being in charge of everything. So I would say the city council could do it, to answer your question, but whether the state for some reason could also. So that's the bizarre answer to your question.
Yeah, but I mean, in this environment where, we're losing tax revenues in every other area, how are we going to make the case that, this is an important tax to be removed at this point?
It's a hard case, but on the other hand, are you going to lose all your small business? If you own, what I would suggest is, and I don't want to pick, but I would say for the storefronts, Dan got it moved to the 500,000 from 250, and this would be for the storefronts. I mean, we also tried there are 130 some supermarkets, believe it or not, in that area, but they're all operating on the 1% margin, and there's some have left, as you know. God knows we need supermarkets, so. So I think you should just aim for the whole thing, because you could say we need revenue, we do, but we also need the small businesses.
And then I want to ask
just to echo the borough president's point, Keith Powers has legislation that would go further than his predecessor, Dan Garodnick, in the city council. And Abby can reach out to his office to pull that bill number for you.
Then I want to ask about what you're thinking, not position, but what you're thinking about the effect of increasing street vendor permits would have on trying to bring back small business in the actual brick and mortar stores. And is anybody analyzing that?
It's beyond controversial, but I can tell you that what I do, I have plenty of situations when grocery store, bodega, deli calls up, Gail, outside is the fruit man and I'm selling fruit. That's no good. So, but what I do, I'll be honest with you, I don't think we can, they need to make a living also. They both do. So what I do is there's a law. And if the fruit person has got an immense display that's illegal, I call the Street Vendor Project, which is the lawyers for the vendors. And they go out to their credit and they look at the situation. And if it's illegal, we make I don't know how else to say, we make an arrangement to move them or to say, you got to conform with the law, right? And when you got your own lawyer telling that helps. Councilmember Kalos can help, but the new law supposedly has enforcement. Now, in the past, a lot of these folks, as you know, have been paying, and I know people who do this, under the table, just an immense amount of money because they couldn't get their own permit. If they can get their own permit and it can be done legally, then I hope that they will not be feeling they have to be illegal in order to make back the $43,000 or whatever they paid for the illegal permit.
Okay, I just want to make a different suggestion. And we're talking about all of these open storefronts along all of the avenues, and sort of promoting, and this is sort of an in lieu of these permits, is for the city. And I don't know if the city were to rent these retail spaces, whether they would be subject to the rent tax. But if the city could rent some of these larger open spaces and create, if you will, indoor vendor spots instead of outdoor locations, you could, you could move this quote unquote street vendor inside and perhaps have better working conditions and provide a better environment, and also, provide, space for them to be in that would sort of mirror what would be on the sidewalk, because one of my concerns is, there's just so much sidewalk, and the sidewalks are truly meant for the pedestrian first. And between the restaurants taking the space for COVID and whatever the mayor is saying is permanent, and then having additional street vendors on the sidewalk, it leaves little or no room for people to walk through our streets, through our sidewalks rather. And we have all this empty retail space. And I just wonder if the city could look at, and specifically the borough of Manhattan, an alternative to rent some of this empty space and create, if you will, vendor booths, much like a private company, Urban Space, does, to create and sell permits for vendors indoors, as opposed as an alternative to there seems to be a lot more indoor space available these days than outdoor space. So I would just recommend that maybe somebody try to look at that as an alternative to taking up more of the sidewalk.
Val, I don't disagree with you. I think it has to be, when I say retail, I mean discussed locally. This is what the challenge is. Lori Tish, whom you probably know, has a wonderful foundation. And some years ago, she was willing to literally help 1,000 greengrocer vendors get started. That's a lot. And but they had to be within, not too close to grocery stores or bodegas. Bad news, to be honest with you, this is citywide, is that only 400 took up her offer because she was going to pay for the whole green cart. The problem was that if you're not in trafficked area where there's traffic, I'm just telling you, then that vendor is not going to make it. So I don't think it's, if we could find a way that vendors could in fact be indoors and there's still traffic, that's fine. But I'm just telling you, they got to operate where somebody sees a banana and they're going to go buy it. That's the challenge, to be honest.
We have a similar model on 116th Street. And I know that Speaker Garrido and now Diana Al are trying to get people to go there to bring up the indoor foot traffic.
It's not, that's La Marqueta, and it's not super successful, just FYI.
So that is one of the challenges. Valerie, I will tell you that before we got the Trader Joe's, I was trying to convince EDC to turn the old Food Emporium, which has been vacant for as long as I've been a council member, and definitely as long as Keith's been a council member, into a public market. We now have Trader Joe's coming in for 2022. And I do want to just mention that, Keith, they were asking questions about removing the commercial rent tax. And I know you carry that legislation if you wanted to speak to it.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I do have two bills related to the commercial rent tax, and it's kind of building on Councilor Garodnick's and Councilor Kalos and the borough president's endeavors a couple of years ago to raise the threshold for it. The two bills I have, one is about removing it, the threshold, raising the threshold on it to be even higher so that we can continue to chip away at it. The cost of the total tax to the city, it was about $1 billion a few years ago. It's extremely high, so it's hard to do it in one fell swoop, particularly now, but it is a good idea to keep chipping away at it. And the second one is really about the pandemic. And so I introduced a bill in, I think it was August or September, about exempting it during the pandemic, being that it's hard to ask people to pay a tax on their rent when they can't even pay their rent to begin with, and to let us give them an opportunity to keep that money and pay their own rent, pay their employees, or do something else with the money. So as we figure out the fiscal situation here a bit for this year, trying to focus on that and trying to get more, try to find opportunities to give some COVID-related CRT relief, and any work you guys can do to help support that would be extremely appreciated. And but I think it's a little bit outrageous to ask them to pay this unfair tax at a moment where they can't even pay their rent.
Right. Well, Keith, thank you for joining us. I mean, that was one of the original questions that we asked was, how can we go about in this environment where we need as much tax revenue as we possibly can to balance that with, again, just putting more taxes on the shoulders of the small businesses. one of the comments, and I guess I'll open this up to the three of you and we'll move into this discussion. One of the comments we received in one of our earlier meetings from one of the restaurant owners was to ask whether it could be considered to allow them to collect the sales tax and use it as a sort of a grant or something to tide them over even a little bit while they wait to be able to open, full time. That was one of the suggestions we received. Again, I realize that it sort of goes it's counterintuitive to being able to run the city and state on taxes, but
sales tax is regulated at the state level. Keith and I worked on legislation around sales tax with a former Assembly member, Jonathan Bing, to create a sales-free tax zone on the Upper East Side during the 2nd Avenue subway. And there's a sales and use tax. So that's not possible, but what something we did do, which we've been widely criticized for, is allowing restaurants to charge an additional service fee as long as they disclose it. Keith, do you remember the details on it?
Yeah, there's we passed it. I'm not sure if anyone's using it yet at this point, but basically there was other cities allow restaurants to charge a surcharge. We did not. There was a bill in the council to allow for restaurants to add an additional surcharge onto bills, and there's some consumer protection concerns around that. But we passed a COVID surcharge bill, which allows a restaurant to cover some any additional costs related to COVID, obviously help them stay in business by adding an extra surcharge onto the bill as needed. I haven't yet to date see restaurants do it, and that's that's okay. It's their option to do it or not, but to allow them to add a little bit more on to help cover additional costs or help them in the recovery effort. We passed that a few months ago, and restaurants do have some freedom to use it now, which is to on top of your bill to do an extra COVID surcharge. It's kind of
right. I think that restaurants have been reluctant to do that, but I think they've also seen very generous tips coming their way from people who are actually their patrons. And so they're using those as a sort of better to get it voluntarily than to charge somebody and then, they don't come back a second time.
Third-party delivery apps add to the cost of menu items, which seems problematic to me. But before we lose Borough President Brewer, Valerie, do you mind if, let's see if there are any questions.
No, go ahead.
I know Marco, Michelle, Andrew, do you have a question he's a member of the public, for Borough President Brewer? I could see you, so if you do, you could nod your head.
I do.
Okay, so let's go to Andrew, and thank you for unmuting. Go ahead.
My question was directed towards the council members, and I'm wondering why they would have supported a piece of legislation which essentially perpetuates taking advantage of immigrants, people of color, in that they're perpetuating a system where a $100 license is sold in an illicit market for $20,000 or $25,000 a year. And these immigrants that are supposed to be pulling themselves up by their bootstraps are actually indentured through the process of the way the city handles these licenses. I'm wondering why the licenses weren't, the enforcement wasn't addressed in the short term, not 10 years from now, but in the short term.
Well, I'll answer that.
Thanks.
A couple of things. I mean, I don't agree with the description of that, to be honest, just really be frank. I think that we do address the black market. I think we created,
we don't use the term black market anymore, Keith. I'm sorry.
Okay. So the legal market. So
thank you.
I had weighed out these issues for a while, being that I think it was an important goal here to provide it, essentially create new small businesses in here for folks. To address the illegal market and to increase enforcement, all issues that people have asked about for a very, very long time. And also to look at ways to do that for what I think is a fair way, which is final bill does, which is a geographic dispersion of those bills. Only a quarter of them can come into Manhattan. That was in the final version of the bill. But it does create it does create an enforcement agency, which we are severely lacking right now. If you care about, if you want to see them expanded and or if you care about issues that can arise with them, I think having a dedicated enforcement entity is an important part of that. If you walk, because I'll tell you why, if you walk out of my house on a weekend, there are people who are doing vending. I get calls about it all the time. And there is very unclear and inconsistent enforcement of it right now. DCA doesn't want to go out there on the weekends. The PD is a little bit sporadic in their enforcement or aren't doing it right now. And so having a dedicated centralized entity to do the enforcement part is important to this whole equation. But also, we're essentially, I know there's lots of issues here. I've weighed this one a lot as we were coming to a vote on this, but I think there's an opportunity here to create a better and clearer and more transparent market around this stuff, add the enforcement in, and then offer that opportunity. And I don't think, as explained, it's exploitative or anything like that. I think it does. I'll just add the last issue I'm going to add is we could do this a lot quicker, but people didn't want. I mean, there was a lot of desire here to go out of the pace that we're going at to be able to address issues in real time if they arise, to sort this out and to get it right. And so I think that's why some of the timeline that you're, I think, criticizing is the way it is, to be fair.
Valerie and I are hoping that we'll be able to have a dedicated meeting with the vendor committee, and I see both Michelle and Marco, the co-chairs of that committee, to jointly discuss these issues. And maybe you'll come back, Keith. And I know Ben, you had something to say, but before Gal leaves, I'd like to bring it back to her and see if she has, Borough President, if you have comments about the vendor law or anything else. I know Michelle and Marco, you've had your hands raised. I'm assuming that your questions are for the Borough President, and I have one as well based on something that you've said earlier. So if we could unmute Marco, and this is for Borough President Brewer, I hope, Marco. Yes?
Marco, confirm unmuting.
I think Marco wants to talk about the presentation.
Okay, then he's, okay, then let's go to Michelle.
Michelle, confirm unmuting.
Yeah, hello everybody, and for the elected officials, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, as I think all of you know, I've been working on vendor issues for 100 years now, and I'm very pleased to see that the separate vendor enforcement squad is in the current bill, 1116. We had asked for that many, many years ago, and actually it was in one of the original versions of this bill. However, nobody could say what the ratio was of enforcers to vendors. So the fact that there is an enforcement squad, that's good. We've been working for that, and I'm very glad it's in there. But until we can know what the ratio is, you want to, over 10 years, expand this to 4,000 on the street. Well, what's the ratio? If you have 2 inspectors per borough, that's really not going to do it.
Michelle, could you hold off on that for a couple of minutes? I know Borough President Brewer has to leave, and this way we could, pardon me?
I'm okay for a few minutes. I'm okay. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, so I know that the borough president knows I had been working on this. I've been in contact with her directly, as do Keith and Ben. However, so that's an important thing to consider in this bill. The other thing, when you say you call the street vendor project, if you see a violation, I just wanted to throw out there that when you're talking about food carts and fruit tables, you can also call the Department of Health. They're actually quite responsive. If you give them an exact location, they do have a representative that they do send out. One of the biggest issues that we're facing with the fruit stands is the distance from the supermarkets. And this bill did not change, unless the final version did. It didn't change the 20 foot. It was requiring a 20-foot distance. We had asked for 25 feet, because in truth is, it's not, the competition is one thing, but
Michelle,
the other thing
there was
is
a
crowding,
change on the 20 feet, which was something that we felt was a pretty big change. Currently, if you have an outdoor cafe, it is 20 feet from the entrance, not 20 feet from the outdoor cafe. Now that everyone has an outdoor cafe and a sidewalk cafe, it is 20 feet from the sidewalk cafe. So I got a lot of, we had a meeting with Dave at Island, and they were 20 feet from his door, but not 20 feet from his sidewalk cafe. It will now be 20 feet from the sidewalk cafe, which
Okay, that's
changed
helpful.
Dave's
That's helpful.
situation.
That's helpful and that's good. But of course, there's not a cafe in front of a supermarket. So that's the other issue. But I wanted to say it's not only the competition thing, it's a pedestrian crowding thing. You know, when people are walking in and out of a supermarket, and you know, times are different now, but you know, if and when, we can only hope that we get back and people are actually on the streets and they're going in and out of storefronts. The extra 5 feet is a very big difference. The other big issue with the fruit stands is that they're confined to an 8-foot table. One of the big enforcement things is that many of them have 2 8-foot tables and are also storing the fruits and vegetables on the sidewalk or in street pits, which also speaks to, you know, they get exhaust from cars. It's not the most sanitary thing to do. So the point is this could all be livable if that enforcement squad is really sufficient. And in the same way that a parking meter thing is, I mean, I know that if I don't run back to pay my meter, if my meter is out, I'm getting a ticket. There are enough meter enforcement people out there where I can bet that I'm going to get a ticket.
Michelle,
That's not so with this. So
Michelle,
I'm just looking.
You're right, because right now we just have police and we throw police at everything. The reason people write tickets is that there's a vehicle and traffic enforcement agency, which we actually removed from the police department. And so by actually having a person doing it, I just want to echo something Keith was saying, is just right now, and Keith and I did it when we worked for Jonathan Bing with you a century ago, which is like we were out there with tape measures and the 19th precinct went out and wrote tickets to everybody. But if any of us were to pick up the phone right now and ask 19th precinct, like, I see somebody and their table is 10 feet wide, they would say we are not writing that violation. And so by having this unit up and running, they will actually do their jobs.
Yes, Ben, I'm aware of that. I know that the mayor had instructed the police department to no longer enforce vendor law. And that's why I'm stressing this enforcement squad. And I think it's a good idea. I'm just stressing the numbers. So, and this is not to be petty and it's not to be picky on the vendors and it's not to be anything like that. But if they are forming an industry, which they are, and if they are considered professionals, which I think they are, if they are small business people, then they too, like everybody else, has to comply. So that is my point with the vendor enforcement. I hope it works, increasing the numbers. I hope it stops the buying of illegal licenses. But frankly, I think if you got 4,000 on the street, the 4,000th and first person who wants a license may be tempted to do the same thing. The last thing I will mention is I'm not so happy, and I know that the veteran vendor community is not so happy with this bill. They always seem to be getting the short end of the stick. There's going to be 4,000, they only get 400. You know, these guys work very hard. Many of them are really career street vendors, and they were not too thrilled with this bill. There are other things to say about it, but that's now water under the bridge. We've got to work with what we have, and these are a few suggestions. So, and also my very last is the vendor panel. The last version I saw, there was only one community member on there. So I'm hoping that got increased with the very last version of what was passed, or if it hadn't, to please increase it. We have a lot of community groups. I don't want to dominate the panel, but I believe we were only one of about, was it 11 or 12? I have the bill right here, but I don't remember. But anyway, those are my comments. So if everybody could be aware, we're all working towards the same point here. There's a lot of stakeholders. We're all trying to live together, and enforcing everybody's rights is one of the ways to do it. So thank you all very much. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank
you, Michelle.
So Marco, I don't want to pass you by. Do you have a question for the borough president? You
I
have
do
not
for
been-
both. Although I do for both.
Okay, go ahead. Well, do the
I
borough
have-
president first.
I'm okay. Go ahead. I've got a few minutes.
But the street vendors, according with the planning together, that is going to be approved by the end of the year and will be enforced on 2022. Said the way that the city has been handled is inefficient and ineffective. And to approve, I don't understand why they approve in a hurry when you are having the opportunity to plan together, plan the community along with the street vendors, and then we can have a better outcome. And I think that's a question, because I don't understand, I cannot comprehend. That's about street vendors. I want to get out from that part. The second part is about it's great to help the small business, especially the restaurants, definitely, without no doubt. I have an information. Prior to COVID, the community board aid have 12% of vacancy rate in restaurants, commercial spaces, according with city planning. And the normal vacancy is between 8 to 10. That's according with them. So I read it, the vacancy rate according with city planning that they did a survey in July. They said our business is running 71%. So if it's 71%, myself, I walk the whole neighborhood. And I found it, for instance, on First Avenue, we have 38 store vacancies. On York Avenue, 12. On Second Avenue, 24. So apparently, it is 71% that the business closed in our community. I agree with that part. But the other part is for those businesses that stay right now, there is a lot of tools to help them. Great. But the only thing we need is a data to find out what is the real financial situation of each of them. Some of them, they have been received good financial benefit, which is great, by the way. Others not. We want to figure it out. What is the real situation so we can help uniformly to everybody and stop to enforce like what we do in the outdoor spaces, that some of the restaurants, they have almost the same space that they have inside, and others a little bit more, others less, others in compliance. But this is not, there is no regulations at all for them right now. So, and I accept that because we are living in a crisis, and we have to accept that. But what happened when reach maybe July, maybe April, when they supposed apparently to vaccinate many people? So now the situation will change dramatically, but we would like to have ready this data so we can start tackle specifically those businesses that are maybe at the end of to collapse. Probably there are good business that are still working very well. So we need to help those businesses that we're going to disappear. And that is my question, Gail, that we need to have data so we can see how many grants they have been receiving, how many jobs they has been created. So then we can figure it out, a good strategy to help them. And probably we can say, like, we can give tax reliefs, we can do a lot of stuff, but without that kind of information, we cannot move forward. So this is the right time to start doing this data, especially for the financial situation of these restaurants. Thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know if you were here earlier when I said that thanks to the city council, we have a bill. The bill states that by the end of this month, the Department of Finance has to have in its hand and displayed for the public. Every owner has to tell the Department of Finance whether or not they have a vacant. If they have a vacant storefront, then they have to tell us they have a vacant storefront. They have to give us the square footage, and they have to give us the previous rent. And that is going to be on the open data platform. Now, that's supposed to be the law, Marco. Let's see whether we're going to start getting them, making sure that it gets enforced. But that is the law. And so that will help us with data, because right now, I know I make up data, to be honest with you, because I don't really know. And I think that'll help a lot. Then we can say in Board 8X, this is what really exists, because the owners know whether or not the person has decided to leave or to continue the lease, or we don't know. When I see an empty storefront, I was at one the other day and I said, oh my God, they're gone. And then a local person who knows the owner said, oh, no, they just boarded it up during the pandemic. I said, oh my God, it looks like it's boarded up. No, Gail, it's not really boarded up. They've been paying the rent. I don't know. So that's why we need this data. And we will have it by the end of this month. Every vacant storefront in the city of New York.
Okay, I just like to maybe,
I'm sorry, I just had a question, Valerie. Gal, you had mentioned the streetscape and a need for a street life, but a lot of new developments all along Riverside Drive, we don't have those kinds of pockets up on the Upper East Side, but a lot of individual buildings have just big lobbies and no rental space for small business, or the space that they lease out are giant spaces for the banks. We have a block where B of A, Bank of America, takes up half of the block, with the lobby most of the rest of the block. Is there any way to help convince developers to have the old-fashioned way where there were storefronts, small storefronts along the avenues at least?
Well, I mean, as you know, whenever you and I and the community board and the city council have to do any kind of a rezoning, we can do it, and we do. We make them have a certain kind, because there's nothing, I hate the big tall windows, you know, and then you end up with a drugstore, national chain. But we know many of your buildings are as of right. And, you know, unless you have a new zoning, which we did on the west side, I don't know how to do it. But if you want to pursue that, it takes some time, because the City Planning Commission has to do an impact study. It took me 2 years, 2.5 years to get the west side passed, because they had to do an impact study. And I have to give Amanda Burton credit. She just pushed and pushed, because she's a little bit like we are, wanting the streetscape to be something that people want to walk along. So that's how you have to do an impact study, and then get the City Planning Commission to initiate it, and then pass it in the City Council. I'd be glad to work with you on that, but that's how you have to do it.
I want Gail Brewer's small business zoning on the east side so badly.
We could talk about that in terms of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. So now I kind of want to throw it over to Keith Powers and Ben Kalos to tell us, to give you guys an opportunity to just tell us, you know, what you have been doing, what the council has been doing in terms of what are we looking towards as a plan? I mean, in our last two SBA meetings, Small Business Committee meetings, a lot of the question is, look, hopefully we're going to come out of this by the summer, by September. You know, how are we preparing to reopen here? And I'll just preface that by saying, you know, we're getting so many mixed messages. You know, the outdoor structures are permanent. What are you guys, I say that affectionately, doing? And tell us what is happening, and how we can be supportive of that for our small businesses in the neighborhood.
Sure, I'm happy to start, and I can have Ben pick it up. So we have done a couple things in the city council, and some of them we're going to need to continue to do and extend and make it permanent, or think about ways to adapt into the future. But we just come to talk about a couple of things the council has done, things I'd like to see done after that, and some proposals that are out there. And recognizing for a second here that, you know, we have a couple of constraints on us as a council. One is our legal authority particularly relative to the state, to do some things around rents and property taxes and sales tax and things like that. And second is resources to actually be able to do some of the big ticket items that I think a lot of us like to do. But at the council, we have passed a number of bills that are focused on small businesses and restaurants in particular. You know, we talked about outdoor dining, and I'm happy to take questions on that, but that was one program I myself and a lot of our council members had pushed for somewhat early on and midway through this pandemic, to make sure that we could keep some business alive here. And it's not been an entire silver bullet for folks, but it certainly has been some way to make sure that people continue to pay the rent. And in top of the financial assistance that the federal government has provided through the PPP grants and the multiple rounds of that, and some other loans and assistance that's been out there, it's been one way the city had in our direct authority, ways to both add socialization back into our lives when we really needed it in a safe and healthy way, but also to provide economic stimulation to those businesses. We passed a bill that was around personal liability provisions, which is for a lot of small businesses. They have a provision in their contract that allows their landlord to go after their personal assets if they are not unable to pay the rent. That seems untenable right now when people can't pay the rent at all. So we have done 2 rounds of extending that to make sure that people we're not putting people's livelihoods in jeopardy. We have an eviction moratorium that has been extended, and we need to continue to extend to allow people to stay in their space and play catch up. We've done the surcharge that Ben mentioned. We did the third-party delivery apps legislation, which limited the fees during COVID for them. I think we may need to extend that in the future. And we've done a couple other programs, and there was some very limited financial assistance at the very beginning of this that went out to small businesses from the city when we were still kind of uncertain about the length of this. What I think that there's a number of proposals at the city and state level that go beyond that. We talk about my commercial rent tax proposal. We can talk about business insurance that a lot of folks were unable to get and ways to change that. I think there's some very low-hanging, to me, some low-hanging stuff that the state could do. I think honestly, they should extend the takeout and delivery service provisions for liquor into the future, because that's like an easy revenue stream for the businesses to be able to make a little more money on each delivery. But the big ticket stuff they need is they need money, and they need to not get like kicked out of their business, lose their property for the renters here. On the financial assistance, the mayor announced a couple things in his state of the city that, as we have more details, we'll share with you. Some additional loans, but they're going to be probably for the hardest hit grants, rather, for the hardest hit areas, and an additional loans program, and some fines and fee relief. But I think we're still going to have to wait to get the details of those and see how our businesses can take advantage of those. And the second thing is stability. And I think the personal liability and the eviction moratorium and those things that help people, and even the CRT, things that let people pay their monthly rent and also not lose their property so they can catch up, are really important to the long-term recovery. A couple of things that I would like to see us happen is I have a proposal at the state level with some colleagues about a recovery release program, which would give us at the city an ability to do a 10-year property tax abatement or some version of a tax abatement to incentivize landlords to come and give affordable leases. So it's a kind of an opt-in program, but it allows the landlord to actually take advantage of a property tax abatement if they decide to go and give a friendly, affordable lease over the recovery period to those small businesses, to lock the small businesses in at an affordable rate, but also offset the cost. And we're trying to get that the state to give us that authority. We'll get you the bill number on that, but it's like one way that brings all the stakeholders into the same team and make sure that we actually have a path that accounts for the different things. And the city would take a revenue cut on that, but it means that a revenue cut, budget cut to that, but it's spread out over the years that we expect to be better years. So we're trying to mitigate our risk in that as well. And we have some support at the state level for that. We're trying to get that passed. I'd like us to ease the burden of doing business here in the city while we're doing this. I'd look for the fine and fees relief is good. Like I said, changing some of the rules for the restaurant seems like an easy one. Making sure that we, work on the outdoor dining to any level there's some uncertainty, expand it to places where there aren't. I think those are all good and easy options that are just about administration of government more than about cost and things like that. And to start being a little more creative in terms of how we use those spaces. I do like the idea that was brought up of trying to look for ways to co-share space and look for shared commercial space or things like that. I think we're going to have to be a little more flexible in how we do that. And we may have to ease up some burdens or rules around that, but that's going to take some time and creativity to do that. But financial relief is the thing that I think everybody's really, needs at the end of the day. And that's going to predominantly come from either probably the federal government or maybe the state government. And if we get it, we need to deploy it very quickly and make it get into the hands of people very quickly. And that's going to be a big administrative task for us. So there's a lot of different ideas. I put out a report. It's on our website called Open for Business, which was back in the summer that called for a bunch of things we could do here in the city. One of them was make permanent or outdoor dining, which has happened. So you can take a look at that on our website as well.
Can you say what you mean by making outdoor dining permanent? What does that mean?
Well, I was saying two things. One is I was saying I called for it and then we eventually did it. That was in our report and that was kind of one of the big staple items. I mean, I think right now, I thought you had said something around, outdoor dining. What I've heard from folks is a couple of things around it. One is I have a bunch of restaurants in my district who can't take advantage of it because they have some restrictions on their street or some impediments. So I've tried to get the administration to think very more seriously about how to ways to relieve them of that. Second is they have to start weatherizing. I think starting in December, they had to start weatherizing there, and that's created some challenges. And third is I think we just want to have I think technically the plan right now technically goes to September, I think actually technically. So we have to, I think, really actually make it permanent and create rules around it. But I think it's been a widely successful program, and lots of our restaurants in our area have taken advantage of it, and it's helped them.
So I just want, you're interpreting permanent as through September.
I believe right now, let me go back and take a look at the mayor's.
Okay, I'm just, permanent is like saying never is a long time too, but it's permanent.
Valerie, I don't think anybody knows, and the mayor is the last one to make a decision, as you know, I'll be honest. So my guess is nobody knows, but we do need to think, because we know if it is quote unquote permanent, what does that mean in terms of making sure your shed, if that's what it's called, is up to par, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes,
so there are a lot of issues. But
thank you.
I think the mayor has no idea what he's doing on that topic. So poor Keith and Ben can't answer because we don't know.
Thank you. Okay, Keith, I didn't want to, permanent had been a big topic of discussion in this committee, so I appreciate, Ben, also, if you want to weigh in on that. And
Sure. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that when this pandemic was still young and it got nice outside and people were out on the streets literally drinking in groups of 40 to 100 people, and the mayor wasn't doing anything about it, I was proud to join with Keith Powers, who had already sent a letter, and Gail Brewer on doing a joint letter together. I think it was their second letter, my first letter. And then I was hoping to get it done before Memorial Day. The mayor waited for all the Memorial Day parties and then did it soon after. But we were able to get it done, and then we were able to make it permanent, at least through the end of the pandemic. And I think that really helped a lot of the businesses. I will say I feel a little bit of conflict, and I'm eager to hear from the community board, because some of the outdoor dining, it feels pretty permanent to me and feels like you're just doing indoor dining outdoors. And as a person who's done that, and I celebrated my anniversary with my wife in December, and we sat at a restaurant, and it was really cold out that night, but it really wasn't that outdoors. So I have conflicting feelings about it, but we are going to be reopening for Valentine's Day. So hopefully some of us can at least enjoy that. But I think we have to figure some of that piece out. And I would just say, in terms of just big picture outside of the pandemic stuff that we've been talking about, is we have the Small Business Jobs Survival Act that Gail Brewer has been working on since she was a staffer, I believe, for Ruth Messenger when she was a member at large in the city council. Is that correct, Gail?
It is, yeah.
And then we are working on another bill for commercial rent control. And then I have a third bill that is seeking to do the exact same thing, which would say, and I know folks who are small business owners can speak to this. There are lawyers running around who are just suing small businesses saying, there's a step. You have a step, and unless you get rid of that step, I'm going to sue you. And most of them say, well, actually, if you give us $10,000 or $20,000, we'll go away. And it's cheaper to pay the $10,000 than to build the step. So what we've proposed is that the city should give out grants or zero interest loans to small businesses and landlords to make a capital improvement so that they can make the business accessible to the 10% of New Yorkers who have a disability. And along with that, it's the pandemic. And so we could also allow them to use some of that money for better air ventilation systems so that people can be in there and be there safely. And so what I do know as an attorney is, all things being equal and unconstitutional, if you give somebody money, you can ask for things from them, like lowering the rent or giving them the right to renew. So that's something I've been particularly focused on, and I think could solve for a lot of the problems that we are seeing. And also, we're trying to see what we can do to make it easier for businesses to stay open and also just reopen when this pandemic, once we are finally through this pandemic.
Shelby Garner, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney's chief of staff, was here last time, and he talked about the government as part of the PPE program providing grants for restaurants that have to conform with certain local regulations. He wasn't sure if they applied to health codes, or maybe he did think they complied with health codes, but is there more lobbying? Is the city council able to lobby the federal government for help, targeted help to small businesses is one question. And another question is there, what do you see the landscape looking like after the commercial eviction is lifted? Do you think that restaurants and stores will be able to earn enough money to stay in place? Will it be lifted in stages? How will that work? And also, Keith, you had mentioned something about insurance, and that is a big problem for businesses who haven't been able to get coverage for business interruption. You mentioned that you're trying to deal with it in several ways. What do you have out there for that?
Sure, I'll do all three maybe.
Sorry to load them up.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Federal government. I mean, look, they just passed a stimulus that has a new round of PPP in it, so that's one way that the small businesses can take advantage of that. You know, with Senator Schumer being now the majority leader, I think there's always an opportunity to talk about New York City specific needs, but also to have a better audience or maybe a clearer line to the person who can help in that front. And I think he's certainly sensitive to those in my conversation with him. And, you know, he was really instrumental in getting the Broadway relief that and the theater relief in there, the Save Our Stages relief. So, you know, I think he's a good asset for us. But I think, you know, in the next stimulus, you know, I'd like to get us, to be honest, I'd like to get us some direct aid and then we can deploy that money a bit. So I think that's my best hope rather on additional relief from the federal government. On the second one, what was the second question?
I was asking about what you envision things will look like when the or the rent, yeah.
Look, I like both evictions, commercial and residential. I'm concerned that you end a moratorium and you start seeing action taken against folks. So I do tend to think we need to keep those a little bit extended, you know, beyond the actual COVID crisis and let people play catch up on their, or, you know, create some opportunities for dialogue, as some folks have been able to do, to talk to their landlord. And I've talked to some who've been able to come up with a sort of a sublease kind of type of, or like a new lease type of for the COVID moment. But I think we're going to have to extend that. And on the phasing, you know, I'm not sure, but I have talked to some folks about the industries that are not open at all right now. That would include like maybe Broadway, but they're not really talking about, like, you know, in performing arts, you know, spaces or spaces that have large capacities, and potentially trying to think about a longer extension program for them beyond the ones that can make, you know, so, because they have no revenue stream right now. So I think, you know, this could happen in phases. But unclear, to be honest. And the third one on business, there's pieces of legislation at the state level. Senator Gennardis has a bill, and Assembly Carroll, I think it is, that the original version of it basically said that business interruption insurance has to cover a pandemic, including retroactively. But I think because of some of the concerns from the industry that would essentially bankrupt, it had to be federally backed, and you basically put the insurance industry underwater on that you'd have to come up with more of like a program moving forward. It's a state level program. I think maybe Senator Krueger or somebody could probably, you know, attend to that question a little bit better about any thinking about that. I do think you could potentially see in the future to maybe create a clear requirement that these things have to cover them. But I think there's been some pushback on the retroactive nature to that. But to me, that if you had that in place, that probably would have solved a lot of your issues around financial relief. So it might be a good question to have from one of the state folks at some point in time.
What Shelby had said from Congresswoman Maloney's office was that the federal government can't do it retroactively, but locally, they thought that it could be done locally. And so we're looking to the states, or I don't think municipalities probably can.
Yeah, I think it's a step. This is at the state level for sure in New York, and there are bills on it, but I'm not familiar, you know, exactly where.
Well, I mean, I think that's just because it's a state regulated industry in terms of the insurance company. But I think, you know, Keith, you're right on the money with the industry saying that would bankrupt them. Go ahead, Alita.
No, I was just going to say, we have some questions from the board, and again from Andrew Fine. If you can unmute Andrew, Saida, and then we'll go to Michelle and Kaz and Marco again. Thanks.
Thanks once again. And I did want to thank both Ben and Keith for their help with outdoor dining. It's provided a real lifeline to small businesses in the neighborhood. And I'd also like to thank them for their enlightened thinking, being forward thinking and creative in their approaches to helping small businesses in the neighborhood. In terms of just back to, and I apologize, back to the vendor issue, just one last time. All I guess I would ask of the local electeds is, granted this is a 10-year plan, and it does not mean that a 10-year plan cannot be improved. And the fact that there are still 3,000 licenses that are not supervisory, where the owner does not have to be, the owner of the license does not have to be on site for the next 10 years. I would suggest in the next batch of legislation, if there is one, that you would audit the 3,000 license holders that are essentially scalping their license. I guess that's probably not a good term either, I'm sorry. That are reselling their license
Illegally.
Illegally, that is a city property and a city, what's the word I'm looking for? It's essentially a gift from the city, and it's a privilege, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And to take that $100 permit and to charge somebody $20,000 to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, you're going to need some really long bootstraps. And I would just ask in the future that the law is actually enforced, the 3,000 license holders are audited, and that we can make sure that they're not reselling city property at values 2,000 times what they pay for them. And I just think that's a wrong use.
Yeah, I agree. I agree
of city licenses.
Look, I hear you. And look, one thing I'd add to this conversation is that, Ben and I had, certain things I think we both aspire to see as part of this that maybe didn't make it in. I know Ben had raised the 25. I think Michelle had asked for the 25 thing. Ben had raised that in the past about the ability to look at that when we had a conversation about it in our delegation. And there were other questions we had. And I think things that we, if either one of us were drafting it, things we might include, things we may exclude, things like that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to look at the bill that we get and vote on it, and talk to our colleagues about any concerns, but recognize that everything we want doesn't make it in, or everything that maybe affects our district doesn't affect others. So, or our area, I should say. So, but I also, I'll be like, I won't be there in 10 years, but I'll at least be there for the shorter period of time. And I think there's an opportunity here to always look at things and make sure they're working, and make sure that whether it's on the enforcement side of things or the licenses that we're meeting our actual targeted goals. And also there'll be lots of new folks in the council who will, maybe have different thoughts on process. So we're never wed to anything. We have things that we'd like to see. And I think there's opportunities ahead to continue to make sure it works and make sure it works for everybody. So I hear you. And, I think this was a long time in the works, this bill, but, we have to make sure it meets its goals, and the enforcement's up and running. And there's an enforcement part of it is that I think at least 75% of the licenses have to be inspected every year, and to meet the enforcement requirement in it. But we have to resource these agencies, and we have to get them up and running.
Yeah. So Keith, I just want to, Andrew, I just want to, this is how I met Andrew Fine at a public hearing on this very subject many years ago. And the point that we were making then, which still doesn't seem to be addressed, is, quite frankly, this is a felony, the sale and the secondary market of these licenses. And I don't understand why there isn't an investigation by either by the Manhattan District Attorney or somebody else. I mean, these licenses are going for more than $20,000 a year. It's essentially stealing from the city of New York. And I don't understand why there's not a more active, just like your bill on the parking permits. This is almost the same thing. This is an abuse, and it's an exploitation of the very people that this whole scheme of legislation is supposed to be helping to pull people up by allowing them to have a very small business. And I just think, you know, when you're talking about in terms of enforcement, there could be a lot more enforcement in terms of, you know, the sale of these licenses and putting a real criminal penalty behind what they're doing. And, you know, a simple fine when you're making 30 grand a license and you own all of them, that's not really going to stop it. And if this program is out there and it's supposed to help people, and I just think it's something that should be considered. I mean, I did speak to somebody from the DA's office who didn't even really know what I was talking about. And it's just another component that you can put in the bill. Sorry, Andrew, I left it back to you.
No, I agree 100%. And I think that the enforcement piece of this legislation is more intended towards the folks that are actually on the street and not following up on the ownership of the initial 3,000 licenses that are out there. And even though the new licenses will be supervisory, which is an excellent idea, the old licenses are not, and therefore the illicit market continues and is perpetuated.
Well, we are phasing them out in this bill, and that is the kind of intention. I can't speak to the DA or anything about their enforcement, but I mean, I think everybody's on the same page for the most part here about trying to, make this about empowering folks and not making it about this sort of elite. So I don't think we disagree on that.
I just don't understand where the actual phase out is, because I know the new licenses are phasing in as supervisory, but I don't see any replacement of the licenses in the next 10 years as replacing original licenses with supervisory licenses. I'd be happy to be corrected, but if it takes 10 years.
Okay, I'll get back to you with clarity. I'll get you an update on it.
Thank you, Keith. And thank you, Ben. And thank you, everybody.
Does Kaz have a question?
Oh, and Andrew, I'm just going to read this to you really quickly because this is literally my 2-second research, but it says, essentially they set some dates out for targets, but it says all permits issued under the subchapter shall be designated for use only when it's sold. I'll send this to you, but there's some language in here that I think covers that.
Does Kaz want to ask a question, Saida? Can you?
He's unmuted.
Yeah, I do. With the rent freeze, so the renter is able to not pay rent, whether they can afford it or not. And there's been articles that people have been paying rent. There's also articles that people can pay rent, but don't pay rent. And in the meantime, what happens to the landlord that isn't collecting the rent? He's got to pay his fees, his mortgage, his expenses. So in the meantime, the renter gets a free ride. The landlord gets, the proverbial. That's one. The time for the permits, could that be sped up from DOH and DOT and whatever? Because it seems, and well, you've got no control with SLA for sure, but, from the time of application to the time of the actual permit, could that be sped up, without the red tape and without legal expenses that, go on forever? And another point with the PPP, the second round, the way it is that what they're taking is an average of the 2020 monthly expense. But if you've been closed for 4 months, your average monthly expenses go down drastically. So how much can you apply for? Is it an average of 12 months times 3.5 or an average of 8 months or 9 months multiplied by the 3.5? You've got no control with the PPP, but, you do have the contacts. Thanks.
Yeah, no, look, I've done it.
One other thing with the DOT and the DOB with the sidewalk, DOT came out with all the rules and regulations and specifications on the outdoor dining. But I'm sure you've seen outdoor dining, which has been converted to indoor dining. I'm sure you've seen outdoor dining, which is taking away 75% of the sidewalk. Outdoor dining, which is supposed to be 8 feet, is 12 feet wide. So, and some places are getting away scot-free, some places getting, a weekly inspection and citation. So is inspection and is that on an equal footing, or is it haphazard, or what's going on?
Okay, so I'll do as much as I can there. Any question on PPP, like SBA related or otherwise, you can email it to my office, and we do have contacts. I did a town hall at the SBA on this, so happy to get those addressed as they're come to you, or you have a question. On the permit issue, I agree with you. SLA is a hard part of this. To me, feels like a necessary part of this, but being that they're state level for us. But yes, I actually was just talking to the mayor's office at this last week about maybe figuring out some way with all the agencies that are doing permitting, DCA, DOH, you name it, to find a faster way to do that in the recovery period. So that, let's say you're a restaurant and you're looking at taking over a space, you see a space that was, a lot of these places are taking over former restaurants, already have a bar or already have the sort of formatting of it. Let's try to get you up and running as soon as we can, because we need that economic activity. We need those jobs, and try to get you up and running as we're able to. So something we're looking at, we're trying to figure that out. On the third one, it's hard to say there's balanced enforcement, because I think enforcement varies based on complaint or other factors. But anybody who's doing indoor dining outdoors is out of compliance and is frankly unsafe. So those do need to be addressed, and you can bring them to our office. You can call 311. You can do a number of wings, but I suggest you do both. And you call 311 and you call our office. And, generally I'd like to talk to the business, so maybe as a first step, so we can just say, we think you're out of compliance, and they don't feel too attacked, or we don't send them, fines all of a sudden, but they have to abide by the law, and they have to abide by keep people safe. And I have seen them, and they're not following what the guidelines are.
And what about the landlord? The landlords not being able to pay their fees because renters aren't paying.
You're totally right.
Before Keith answers that, Ben, did you want to weigh in on that?
Go ahead, Ben. Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to jump in. Costs on any business on this call. I know that expediters are expensive, but I can tell you that I, for one, am a cheap date, and I know Keith Powers is. I know that for a fact. And so what I'll just say is we will expedite your DOB permits or any permits for free. It is literally what we do most of the time for a lot of the childcare providers and pretty much anyone, because DOB is horribly broken. And so don't wait until you've been waiting for weeks or months. Just as soon as you have a problem on day one, and whoever you're working with says it's taking longer than it should, just call us and we will lean on them. We will advocate. We will throw press conferences. We will do whatever we can to get your permits back to you as quickly as possible. Same thing goes for anything you're dealing with on the PPP stuff. And in terms of the rent piece, what I will just say is, if somebody's not paying their rent, that's going to affect their Dun & Bradstreet reports. It's going to have other impacts on them. If somebody can't make it, they should be working with their landlord to try to figure something out. We've been in that situation to try to help people in terms of in those negotiations. And I would just say, for one, that the federal government is allowing people to defer mortgages and not pay interest, or just not pay their mortgage payments, but just pay interest. And if a landlord's getting that, then that should be helpful. And then if folks are landlords on this call and they're not getting rent from their tenants, be they commercial or residential, reach out to us. I know that the certiorari, which is a way of appealing your taxes, hasn't started getting filed, but we are on board to work with you and support folks. No one should be stuck. No one should be going bankrupt or going under because of this pandemic, and we need to help everyone every step of the way. So you heard it first today on Community Board 8. Ben Kalo said I was willing to help landlords too.
Thanks, Ben. We've got that on tape, by the way.
Yep.
And broadcast to the world. Marco, did you have a question? Nice photo, Ben.
Thank you.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, let me talk a little bit about the expediting. The expediting is not working anymore. and now you can do free over the phone on the internet. But the problem is the poor quality of service that we receive from DOV is a nightmare. Either you are lucky to resolve right away in a couple of minutes, or it takes weeks and months because DOV is not working and nobody supervises them. So one of the issues, it should be vaccinate first all the bureaucrats so they go back to work, and then they have supervision. And any people that want to go inside of this facility, it must be wear a mask, otherwise no service. But the point is, my point is about the ventilation. I'm seeing, when I do the designs of restaurants, I design also the ventilation system. So I understand very well the concept. When you put outside a place, outside place, enclosed completely, without no ventilation because of the cold. So that means it's better to have inside the place. Why shouldn't it be inside? Outside, rather to be inside. Less expensive, less hassle, less problem. But I don't dare to go to say that because I don't know about too much about COVID. But the only thing is we can create something. For instance, there are two systems in the ventilation. One is a combined system and one is a split system. The split system is hard to resolve, but the combined system, you can put a law that any ventilation, it has to be 100%. That means the whole area that pull toward to the unit, it has to be outside, and fresh air put it inside. Probably works much better than outside, but I'm not an expert in COVID, so I don't want to go in that direction. So my point is, in the way that I'm seeing, I don't know, maybe because we have a lot of COVID events in our community. This is why we don't feel it, that most of the places has been enclosed. So myself, I'm very cautious to recommend anything. The only thing I'm gonna say is the more vaccinated people, the better we can have more chance to open inside and then remove the outside. Probably maybe they're gonna stay until September. That's fine, because they need to catch up all the expenses or all the debts that they have. That is perfectly fine and reasonable. But after that, we have to be very vigilant, very careful, because we cannot renounce a good quality of life that we have in the Upper East Side. Maybe some neighborhoods, they are willing to do that. That is fine. They can create a new regulations in the zoning resolution. They can put a new style for sidewalk cafes. But for our community, that's what I'm speaking for, is just only we have to bring back all the original conditions and we can have back our open spaces. Thank you.
Yeah, Keith and Ben, I don't know if you know, how you're going to respond to that, but that sort of goes to this whole permanent thing. I mean, these poor restaurants have spent all this money on all this construction because our mayor has said they're permanent. It's almost like adverse possession going on the sidewalk, on the street. And to your point earlier, you know, it's very luck of the draw. I mean, it was on a corner, and you're inside, you were doing mostly takeout with 10 tables. Now in our neighborhood, we have a restaurant with outdoor space where he's seating 50 people, where his business is literally only 10 tables inside. Meanwhile, we have a diner that, because their storefront is only 10 feet wide, they're dying because they have a 10-foot wide storefront. And also they have a bike lane in front of their diner. So they can't even put something, and there is no parking lane to even put anything in. And, you know, I think that at some point the city is going to have to reimburse these guys to take these structures down. And that's going to be.
I don't think we have to reimburse them to take them down. I mean, I do agree with you on the issue that there are ones that there's a little bit of luck of the draw going on, and that I feel like we could probably do more in certain scenarios. It's not going to be able to resolve every single one, to try to accommodate. Like I've had somewhere, you know, the parking regulations or something like the street signage regulations don't allow for it, and I'm trying to fight the DOT to allow it. And there's harder ones where there's a fire hydrant or some other issue there. But I don't think they're going to have to reimburse them to pay them to take them down.
Well, I mean, if people use the word permanent and I go out and spend, you know, $15,000-$20,000 to put up a structure, and then 6 months, 7 months later, you tell me that it can't be there.
Well, right now there's nobody saying that though. I mean,
The mayor said permanent.
no, I'm saying the other way. Why do you think they're taking them down?
Well, I think because some of them are attached to the storefront.
I hear where you're coming from, and I get the concerns around it, but just between us lawyers, like there's due process around takings, and then there's also just the fact that the law is constantly in flux. There will be no right for people to get money back. Like, you know that as well as I do.
Who's going to enforce it? I mean, the fact of the matter is that the sidewalks are taken up by these structures. The parking spaces are taken up by these structures. They are pretty, even though some of them are there, a lot of money has gone into a lot of them. And I think that these store owners have invested a lot of money in them. They are really outdoor spaces. I don't know how many of them will survive the snowstorm, because that may take them down, but or a strong wind, because there's no fire codes that have really been, you know, again, it's the luck of enforcement, or to Kaz's point, the bad luck of enforcement. You can be visited 10 times and then somebody else who has like booths and doors. I mean, a lot of money has been spent here. And I'm concerned about the restaurant owners who have invested this money, as well as, you know, my primary concern, or one of my, is being able to walk on the sidewalk. And now you're going to have this pull and tug of these structures that have been built on the sidewalk and in the parking spaces, and then the street vendors, and, you know, with 4 feet of space for people who, you know, have who are disabled, trying to navigate a sidewalk. I mean, it's terrible out there right now. And I think the good news is that, at least in my observation, is the community is really supporting these restaurants. They're all full. They're all full. And we're very lucky that the COVID rate isn't higher.
Well, it's incredibly high right now.
Not in this neighborhood, it's not been. Come on, it's like 2.25 over the last 7 weeks. I watch it every day in our zip code. And we are damn lucky that we're not at 10%, given how close some of these tables are to one another.
Well, and how indoors some of those places are.
So Valerie, just we hear what you're saying. I think right now we're all trying to get through the pandemic. We're trying to make sure that we give our restaurants as much as they need so that they can stay open. Most people feel about the restaurants the way that a lot of people feel like any mom and pop. And they are really part of what makes the neighborhood what they are. If there's restaurants that are in trouble, I've walked with Keith down Madison Avenue, and he knows the restaurants by name. I know a lot of the owners by name. We're trying to make sure that we're giving them the guidance and support that they need. Yes, there are some restaurants that aren't following the rules. Some of them are. That is part of life. It is hard to want to come down on one versus others. It is true.
Right, and we don't want to do that. I mean, the DOT basically came to a meeting with us and told us that we should be the ones who are calling and reporting the restaurants. We're not going to do that. That's not our job. And we shouldn't have to do that. These guys are fighting for their lives. You're absolutely right. But I think what we're asking you guys is, what does this look like? We got a plan for dismantling.
Sure.
We have
so I think that is a open conversation. Just to be clear, Valerie, in your zip code, in 10021, it's at 3.1%. In my zip code at 10128, we're at 4%. And like, these are bad numbers. Like, if we were talking about this in March or April of last year, people would be freaked out, and we should still be freaked out. Like, there are 4,000 people dying a day. So what I would say is, I think it is appropriate for this committee to try to give us guidance about what does permanent look like. Because I'm hoping that permanent doesn't look like the buildings that we're seeing outdoors in the parking spots. But I will say that when this all started and it was still warm outside, a lot of the outdoor dining in those parking spots looked pretty nice, and it kind of invigorated the community. It was beautiful outside. It felt like some other cities I've been to around the world that have it. So I would love to see a way, and the community board's idea of how to do it right, where we could turn these parking spots into spaces for businesses, because frankly, it's going to take a while for them to recover. And the more tables we can get them, the better.
Then let's invite you and Keith to come back next month, because we're working with the Street Life Committee, right, Kaz? And possibly transportation, to talk about our streets and what they should look like, and all of the different interests that need and want to use the streets. And I just want to ask you.
I would love to do more listening than talking. So
okay, that's fine.
You can have our staff come and we can
bring your
watch
double
ourselves
size
later. We would love to be able to hear, because we want to hear from the community. And
that's what we want to do. And we want to have all of the various stakeholders talking about how they envision the streets and what's important to them and what they see and what matters. And also even maybe the whole question of permanence. But I want to ask you and Keith specifically about City Bike, because there are restaurants that can't expand because of City Bike stations in the gutter, and there's no place else for them to go. And City Bike could be, but isn't, a whole lot more flexible. So it's not a government thing like a bus stop or a hydrant. There's not a safety issue. It's a stubbornness issue. And is there anything that you could do about it?
I mean, I'll jump in because I've had this in a couple places. I think that right now it's a little difficult to move them, and right now, but I think for the part of the long term is we're going to have to think about, first of all, I mean, I think to as avoidable as possible, putting new City Bike stations in places where there is a restaurant that would want to use that outdoor space or something like that, I think is obvious. In my experience, they have been unwilling to do it. I think I'll just for clarity's sake here, like, because I got it confused. Like, the intention is to make these permanent. The intention is to make it permanent. I maybe I got confused there, but like that, to make this an addition to the streets of New York City and to expand business. So if you're going to do that, I think we do have to start looking at, there's obvious places to relocate some bike stations to allow businesses to do it, because it's both a competitive thing with their own businesses, but it's obvious it's part of their livelihood. So short term, it feels like DOT has been resistant to doing that, but I think we should, if we're gonna keep it, or even through the recovery here, think about if there's ways to relocate or site in different places. Those come with challenges too, but I don't think we should try to find the best balance we can between the different uses.
Good. By all means, come back. I'm sorry, Ben.
We've had some success in moving City Bike stations. What I will say is, it isn't a luck of the draw so much as people know where they're getting a storefront. They know if they're getting a storefront in a bus stop, and they're hoping for it. I know Rebecca Seawright, when she got her storefront office, was like, I want to get it right in front of the bus stop. And now she gets a lot of people when there's a bus waiting more than 15 minutes who walk into her office to complain about it, for better or for worse. So what I will say is, public transportation, fire hydrants, bike lanes, all of these things are part of the public fabric. And I think that if the answer is get rid of the City Bike, not going to happen. Get rid of the bike lanes, not going to happen. But can we move the City Bike rack 50 feet in this direction?
Right.
That is something that we can do. Or, hey, this building has commercial space. That building has a entrance but no storefronts. Can we move it over there? Those are the kinds of conversations we can have. We do need the people bought into it. And so, listen, if I went to a building and said, could I move a City Bike rack in front of your building? Most of them would say drop dead. If I said, hey, we're talking about it with the community board, and your favorite diner across the street is asking for this, half the building would probably say, this is where I go on Sundays. Of course I would do anything for so-and-so. We just had that experience with Dave at the Mansion Diner. Like, the community would do anything for Dave. So not with the City Bike rack, but with giving him an outdoor cafe.
Well, that's not really true, Ben, because in our zoning committee, we were not voting for the expansion of that outdoor cafe in violation of the zoning laws. And I'm going to defer to Michelle because she's had her hand raised. So please unmute.
I'm sorry for stepping in it, but if we can let the conversation
Thank
continue.
you.
And then
Thank
let's
you.
go to Billy.
I'd like to make
He
a
hasn't
couple of
spoken.
comments about the outdoor restaurants and then a couple of additional vendors, comments about vendor law. With reference to permanent restaurant expansion, the outdoor, I, for one, am hoping that this does not become permanent. I see it as long as we have the pandemic, want to do anything we can to help the restaurants, absolutely for that. However, the rest of us live here too. Non-restaurant owners live here too. And to crowd every street and with haphazard outdoor construction, there isn't uniformity. I mean, I've been pushing this for years. You're going to have things on the street, do some kind of city design and have everybody uniform. But when you walk up and down the streets, the city looks awful. Every single shed that is constructed is different than the other. It's a different color. It's a different dimension. It causes crowding. I mean, there's a lot of problems with it. It's good for the business at this moment. But when these people started their business, they started with indoor premises that they calculated would give them good, substantial, or adequate income. We're helping them because these are difficult and unusual times. This is never meant to be permanent. And then you would have to completely revamp all of the zoning law. And what about the people who have been paying for cafes because they've had a license for it for years and years and years? And now you're letting everybody have a cafe. I mean, this is a very, very big issue, and it's very short-sighted. And it's very foolish to just throw out the word permanent. You know, they did this even when they put the plaza in Central Park, in Times Square, and the plaza on Broadway, which narrowed Broadway to 2 lanes, as though everybody needed to have beach chairs in the middle of Manhattan. This is not your expectation. So hopefully things will go back to normal. The best thing we can do for the economy of this city is get everybody vaccinated, get the disease under control, and let everybody reopen, and then hopefully they'll go back to their indoor premises and they will do well as they had before. So that's my comment about that. With reference to the vending, one of the big opportunities that this bill missed was siting. SITING. In other words, there was a very big opportunity here to do assigned locations for vendors. Vendors have never said they don't want assigned locations. Granted, there'll always be a fight for the most trafficked locations. We understand that. You can accommodate for that by adjusting the costs of a license. So if a vendor is cited for 84th and 1st, he pays less for his license than the vendor who is cited at a more, at 86th Street, a more high traffic area. But not to have addressed citing, where vendors, you're increasing the number of vendors on the street, they go out to a location and they literally fight about it. Or they try to get there earlier and earlier and earlier, so you're having them show up at 5 o'clock in the morning, or they're leaving their carts or they're leaving their trucks, they leave their inventory trucks on the street. You are creating mayhem by not dealing with citing. If you rent a store, you're renting a location. It's the same thing with this. And to make matters worse, in terms of that decision, you have a good thing, which we had recommended, which has been part of our resolutions, was putting chips on each of the cart. And now it's my understanding that every time a cart goes up for renewal or a new cart, they get a chip on them. The chip meaning that somehow some kind of tracking will be available, because that's what the chip means. However, they never wrote the programs for the tracking. So number one, if you have the chips, so if you write the programs for the tracking, you would then know if people are compliant. And second, and even more important, is these food vendors are supposed to go into their commissaries every 24 hours for cleaning, for getting potable water, for restocking their food supply. If you don't know whether or not they go, because the in and out checking at these commissaries is very haphazard. The commissaries are privately owned, not owned by government. If it's not lucrative enough for an owner, it goes out of business. And then another commissary nearby might be overcrowded by vendors coming to them. So with tracking, you would know if the vendor visited the commissary that day. You have put in good up-to-date technology, 21st century technology, but nowhere is it being used. So I think it was a very big, lacking in this particular bill. There's so much more that could be done. And I would suggest if there are going to be, future bills that somehow we can maybe talk about tracking. The city is doing it, so I imagine they have something in mind. And I think the sooner we get that going, the better. But I just wanted to also address the licenses that are being bought illegally in the amounts of like $25,000. Gee, vending must be a very, very lucrative business. If a small person, not yet an entrepreneur, somebody just starting out can afford to pluck down $25,000 and somehow thinks that that's going to be a worthwhile investment in the short term. So I suggest we look into that, and I'm hoping that having the supervisor vendor needing to be at the cart, that will eliminate some of the, it was always supposed to be one license, one cart, but we know that big conglomerates have controlled this for years and years and years. And that's why they were able to buy these licenses. So all those things considered, I want to put that out there. I'm not expecting an answer from anybody at the moment because I know that's not possible. But to me, in the current vendor bill, to have overlooked the 21st century technology, which you're installing and what you should do about it, to have overlooked the citing was a very, very big deficit in this particular bill. I hope we can go forward and look to the future for something better than this. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks,
Keith
Michelle.
or Ben, before we go to Billy, do you want to respond to Michelle? You don't have to.
Sorry, I mean,
Yes.
we'll talk. Yeah, I have to leave momentarily, but I didn't want to.
Let's go to,
Yeah,
let's
we're going to
go
make Billy our last question.
presentation.
Go ahead, Billy.
Saito, please. Yeah, thanks.
All right, I'm going to keep it really brief. Just real kudos to both council members who are still here with us at 8:37 at night. That just shows how lucky we are. I hope that wasn't too obsequious, but it's really true. So look, this is going to be more of a comment than a question in the interest of time. But look, I think we've got to support our small businesses in the neighborhood. I'm very interested in outdoor dining being made permanent, but that's not really what I want to say. What I want to say is, as a community board, I would like us to take seriously this opportunity to reimagine what our streets are going to look like in the years and decades to come. And I don't know if it's through this committee, a new committee, something else, but something that can bring together all the stakeholders, people who, small businesses, but people who think outdoor dining is great, people who think it's been terrible, people who are worried about the effect on, the rest of the streetscape. And if we aren't planning to do that already, I'd really like us to consider convening some sort of committee or forum or multiple forums to have those discussions as a community. I think it would really benefit us to sort through a lot of the problems or concerns that have been identified tonight. So that's all I wanted to say, and I wanted to thank Keith and Ben a lot for being here with us.
Thanks, Billy. I just want to say that I want to echo the thank you to both of our council members for staying with us this long, to our borough president who stayed well beyond what she had originally committed to, and to thank Natalie Mendel and her team, Francesca Bruce and Christopher Frere, for coming in and telling us about their program. And I hope that people will spread the word about the New York City Small Business Resource Network to the businesses in our community to take advantage of these resources that are available and these government grants, et cetera. So I just want to wish everyone a very cozy snow evening and hope nobody gets hurt on the street tomorrow, slipping on the snow. And we'll see you next month. Thank you very much for
Can
attending.
we get a hearing on the snowplow for the pedestrian crossings that me and Keith bought?
Oh yeah, did you get it?
They won't let us buy it.
Oh no! For those of you who don't read, read the patch anyway. our council members have been trying to get a snowplow that will go through the bike lanes to make it safe for
And the pedestrian crossings.
and the pedestrian crossings. So, gee,
Thank
we
you.
could have really used that.
Yeah, there are logistical or city bureaucracy issues, I guess. Listen, you guys, Keith and Ben, thank you so much. We're so grateful to have government representatives who care about small business as much as the community board and our neighbors and residents, and understand the value of small business to the viability of New York City. So it's critical, and I know how you feel about the arts too. So all of those are essential to the city. So thank you, and please come back. We'll send you an official
Anytime.
invitation
Thanks
in
again.
March to us and to Street Life, and we'll all be working on what the city should and could look like. So thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.